directed differentiation of human iPSCs to pancreatic progenitors requires careful activation of Wnt, activin, BMP, and all these signaling cascades. Just kidding. I'm not here to throw scientific jargon at you. I'm here to tell you a story. A story about time travel, a sheep, some Japanese geniuses, and cells that can become anything. A story that ends with you and the future of medicine. And the reason I chose to do it this way is because I want to give you something ChatGPT cannot do, at least not yet, to take you on a journey through time, a story told live. So buckle up, we're about to jump through decades of science in the next 15 minutes. Let's rewind to 1996. The Spice Girls are huge. There's no TikTok, no smartphones, and somewhere in Scotland, a little sheep named Dolly just made history. Now, what made Dolly so special? It wasn't the fact that she was cloned, but rather how she was cloned. Now, you see, we have two types of cells in our bodies: germ cells, the cells that can give rise to new life, the eggs and sperm, and somatic cells, which is everything else: heart, skin, muscle, hair. Look, we're 99.9% made up of somatic cells. Now, back in the day, before Dolly, scientists believed that only germ cells could give rise to new life. Somatic cells, on the other hand, they were too specialized, too set in their ways, like a criminal lawyer suddenly deciding that he wanted to be a ballet dancer at 50. Theoretically possible, but no one really thought it would happen. But Dolly changed all that. So what scientists did was, they took a highly specialized udder cell, a somatic cell, and they took an egg cell, which is a germ cell. They emptied out its contents, and then zap, fused them together with a little bit of electricity. The result, a living, breathing Dolly. Now, the man behind all of this was Professor Sir Ian Wilmut, who, fun fact, also happened to be my first scientific mentor. I was 8 years old at the time, and I didn't know it yet, but that little sheep was the first breadcrumb on my own path into regenerative medicine. Let's fast forward 10 years. This is now the year 2006. We're in Japan. Enter Shinya Yamanaka, a brilliant Japanese scientist who wondered, what if we could skip the eggs, skip the electricity? Could we genetically press rewind? And so he did. He identified 4 genes, let's just call them ABCD, and he introduced them into skin cells. And just like magic and a little bit of science, these cells became pluripotent again. The cells forgot what they were. It was like a factory reset. They went back in time. Let me pause here for a second. What is pluripotency? Pluripotent cells are cells that can become any other cell type in the body. They can be brain, muscle. They are the first cells that give rise to the entire human being in the blastocyst, which is in early embryology. Let me put it this way. Pluripotent cells are like kindergarten students. Imagine kindergarten students on their first day at school. They're full of potential. They can grow up to be firefighters, artists, scientists, teachers, you name it. But then as time goes on and they enter high school, they drop certain subjects and choose to focus on certain others. By the time that they finish school and they're now into university, they're starting to become specialized. And by the time they've finished university, they're brilliant at what they do. They're now somatic cells, but they're no longer pluripotent. That's exactly what happens with iPSCs. Yamanaka called them induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPSCs. Before this, the only place to get them was from the embryo. But now, no embryos needed, no ethical drama, just pure potential. Yamanaka won the Nobel Prize for this discovery, and what he gave to the world was priceless. Limitless starting material to grow our own cells and organs. So if Dolly was the first step into time travel, iPSCs were the time machine. Now here where it gets super interesting, because this is where I come in. I work on using iPS cells to making insulin-producing beta cells, the very cells that are destroyed in type 1 diabetes. Let's take a moment to understand what life looks like in a day of a person living with type 1 diabetes. Imagine waking up exhausted every morning, not the I stayed up too late binging on Netflix exhausted, but I really cannot get myself out of bed exhausted. And that's because your cells are starved for energy. Your body does not produce enough insulin, therefore you're not able to utilize the sugar in the food that you've just eaten for energy. So before you can even eat your breakfast, take that first bite of toast, you need to prick yourself, measure your blood glucose, and inject yourself with insulin. And then you will do this again at lunch, and then at dinner, and maybe another 1 or 2 times depending on what your day looks like. That's up to 5 injections a day, every day. And you need to calculate the dose of your insulin very accurately, otherwise you'll be in trouble. So every snack becomes a math problem. Every meal becomes a math problem. Every party, excursion, anything you want to do in the day is a math problem. So type 1 diabetes is not a condition, it's a full-time job. Now imagine if you could take some cells from this individual, you could take blood or skin, you could rewind them, make iPSCs, and then slowly guide them step by step into becoming healthy insulin-producing cells and transplant them back into the person. No risk of rejection, no need for donors, their own cells. That's what I'm working on. But that's not easy to do, because we have to guide these cells very specifically using growth factors and molecules and guide them stage by stage, first into definitive endoderm, then the primitive gut tube, then pancreatic progenitors, endocrine progenitors, and then finally insulin-producing beta cells. Also, these cells are not perfect, so they're immature compared to the pancreatic cells of the gut, of the pancreas. And the other problem is that we also produce off-target cells in the dish. So we need strategies to prune the unwanted cells before we can transplant these cells into a patient. So it's not perfect, but even so, what iPSCs have given us is incredible because they help us reduce our dependence on donors, on organ donors, because there just aren't enough organs to go around. Thousands of people die every year waiting for one. And it's not just diabetes. We're using iPSCs in a lot of cool ways. We're growing mini organs in the lab. We're testing drugs on mini you avatars in a dish. Scientists have also transplanted iPS-derived retinal cells to cure macular degeneration. They've also used iPS-derived neurons to treat Parkinson's. So these are not just ideas anymore. This is real. This is all in early clinical trials. So the future of medicine is not about pills. The future of medicine is about you, your cells, reprogrammed, reprepared, restored. The future of medicine is not going to look like the hospitals today. We'll probably have a 3D bioprinter in the operating room, or we're going to have labs that can grow your organ on demand. Imagine never needing an organ donor ever again. And imagine being able to treat a disease before it even occurs, because we understand your cells so well that we can predict and heal before it even happens. But with great power, and stem cells are powerful, comes great responsibility. We're going to have to ask ourselves really important questions. How do we make sure everyone has equal access to these therapies? How do we make sure that these therapies are affordable? How do we make sure we're not creating inequality in this brave new world? These are questions that will be answered by you. because the future of medicine is not going to be designed by just scientists sitting in labs. We're going to need thinkers, artists, policymakers, lawyers, engineers, and students like you, people who care enough to ask, how do we use this power wisely? Because what we choose to do with this power, how we choose to share it, protect it, or regulate it, is going to define not just the future of medicine, but the future of humanity. So let's zoom back to today. First came Dolly the sheep, then iPS cells, then, you tell me. Now we're printing organs and rewriting disease. It's been a wild ride, and we did this in under 15 minutes. But now the real question is, what will you do with it? Thank you.